Imagine standing in the middle of a vast desert, but instead of seeing massive wind turbines, you look up and see a kite the size of a skyscraper pulling electricity straight out of the sky. Sounds impossible, right? Well, not anymore, because a breakthrough in Inner Mongolia just changed the future of wind power forever. This isn't the wind energy you think you know, this is wind power reinvented, and it all starts with a giant flying wing.
So when you think about wind power, what comes to mind? I'm guessing you probably picture those huge white turbines, right? The ones dotting the landscape. But what if the next giant leap in wind energy isn't a turbine at all? What if it's a kite? And not just any kite. We're talking about one the size of a skyscraper. Yeah, you heard me right. Let's dive into this revolutionary tech that's being tested as we speak.
All right, so here's what we're going to cover. First, we'll look at this giant kite's big debut. Then, we'll break down how in the world it actually generates power. We'll touch on the science behind why it works so well, look at the jaw-dropping savings, and then wrap up with what's next for this whole idea. Okay, let's head over to Inner Mongolia, specifically a place called Al-Shaleft Banner. This is where something really big just happened for renewable energy. And look, this wasn't just some routine test flight. This was the moment they proved a whole new way to capture the wind's power could actually work.
So just to give you a sense of the scale here, check out this number. 5,000 square meters. That's the surface area of the kite they just flew. It is without a doubt the biggest power-generating kite on the planet. But, 5,000 square meters, what does that even look like?
Well, try to picture this. You take 12 full-size basketball courts and you stitch them all together. That is how big this thing is. And that massive sheet of fabric was flying hundreds of meters up in the sky. So yeah, we're a long way from the little diamond-shaped kite you flew as a kid. This is basically a wing for a power plant. And the best part? The test was a total success. The team over at China Energy Engineering Corporation pulled it off. They got this monster kite up, unfurled it completely, and brought it back down in one piece. Getting something that big deployed and then retracted safely, that is a huge engineering win.
Okay, so how does a kite make electricity? I mean, really, this is where it gets super interesting, because there's not a single spinning blade involved. Instead of a turbine, the engineers call it a ladder system. A ladder system, what exactly is that?
It's actually pretty straightforward when you break it down. You've got three key pieces. First, the kite, obviously. That's up in the air. Then, you've got these super strong cables, the traction cables, that tether it to the ground. And finally, on the ground, you have the generators that make the juice. The real genius is in how they all interact.
The whole process is, well, it's pretty slick. First, they use a helium balloon to lift the kite while it's still folded up. It carries it right up to about 300 meters. That's the sweet spot. Once it's up there in those super strong winds, the kite just unfurls. It's kind of like a parachute opening, but instead of slowing something down, it's designed to catch as much wind as possible. The wind grabs it and pulls hard. That pulling force travels right down the cables, and that constant tugging motion is what turns the generators back on the ground. It's an amazing way to convert wind power into electricity, and you don't need a single massive turbine blade to do it. But wait a second. You might be thinking, why go to all this trouble? 300 meters up in the air. Why not just build a taller turbine? And that's a fair question. The answer, it turns out, is all about atmospheric physics.
See, down here, where we live, the wind is messy. It's choppy, it gets all swirled up and slowed down by buildings, trees, hills, you name it. Scientists call this messy zone the atmospheric boundary layer. But if you can get above that layer, up around 300 meters, everything changes. The wind up there is a whole different animal.
And this really shows you what I'm talking about. The wind way up there isn't just a little stronger, it's way stronger. And more importantly, it's incredibly constant and stable. When you're trying to generate power, consistency is everything. You want a steady source. Tapping into that smooth, powerful stream of air means you can make power more reliably for way more hours in the day. Okay, so we've got a really smart system that taps into a much better source of wind. Sounds good in theory, right? But what does that mean for the real world? Let's get into the numbers, because this is where the advantages become, well, kind of staggering.
First up, land. A normal wind farm takes up a ton of space, but this kite system, because the generators are all in one spot on the ground, it can slash the land footprint by up to 95%. Just think about that. Suddenly you could put wind power in all sorts of places that just weren't possible before.
Then there's the materials. You know those giant steel towers for turbines? This system pretty much gets rid of them. We're talking about a 90% drop in how much steel you need. That's a huge deal for the environment. Less manufacturing, less carbon, and of course, it makes everything way cheaper.
And when you put it all together, you get this. This tech isn't just potentially cleaner, it's also a lot cheaper. The projections show that making electricity this way could be about 30% cheaper than with the wind turbines we use today.
And just to put that power into perspective for you, a single 10-megawatt system could churn out something like 20 million kilowatt hours a year. That is enough clean electricity to power around 10,000 homes. So we're not talking about some small-time experiment here. The potential impact is absolutely massive.
And look, this isn't just wishful thinking. The guy in charge of the test, Cao Lun, he basically said this flight was all about collecting the hard data they need to build out the full-scale system. And guess what? They got it. The project has the green light to move forward.
So this successful test really is a huge turning point. The big question now is, what's next? Let's take a look at the roadmap.
And the plan from here is pretty ambitious. Right now, they've proven it works with one kite. The very next step is to start flying multiple kites at the same time, like a coordinated kite farm in the sky. If those trials go well, the big goal is to kick off full power generation trials by the end of next year. That's when this whole thing goes from being an experiment to a real power source.
And you have to understand, this is a really big deal. This isn't some garage startup. This is China's first major national research and development project focused specifically on high-altitude wind energy. That means it's got serious government backing, and they see it as a key piece of their energy strategy for the future.
So it's kind of wild to think about, right? For centuries, the kite has just been a toy, and now it might be on the verge of becoming a major part of our clean energy future. By literally reaching for those stronger, more stable winds way above our heads, this tech is telling us to look up for the answers. The only question left is, just how high can it go?
For centuries, the kite was just a toy. Now, by reaching for the powerful winds high above our heads, it's on the verge of becoming a major part of our clean energy future. This isn't science fiction. The test flight was a success. The only question left is, just how high can it go?